ticking clock.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another exciting episode of Hanging Out with Chops. I'm your host, Chops, a recording engineer by trade. We talk about everything music here, life from the recording studio to life outside the recording studio. Like always, a big shout out to all you returning listeners and to all you here for the first time. Thank you for joining us. It's a wonderful community. So glad that you're here. You know, we talk a lot about music, how it makes us feel good, how it brings people together, how it hits the soul in ways nothing else can. But today, I want to start somewhere we don't usually go. A hospital. Not a modern one, a military hospital. It's World War II, one of the darkest chapters in history. Rows of young men lying in beds, men who had seen things you and I can barely put into words. Men missing limbs, some shaking uncontrollably, some staring at the ceiling, silent, trapped in their own heads. These were soldiers who carried the weight of freedom on their backs. Men who served because someone had to stand between the world and its intentions. And when they came home, they didn't just come back with scars you could see. They came back with the ones you couldn't. Here's the wild part. Doctors had medicine, they had surgery, they had treatments. But for a lot of these soldiers, nothing was touching the pain inside. Then something unexpected happened. Local musicians, volunteers, not medical staff, started coming into the hospital to play. They brought guitars, fiddles, accordions, whatever they could carry. They weren't doing therapy. They weren't following a program. They just showed up to honor the guys who had fought for their freedom. And what happened next changed the entire field of healthcare. The soldiers' heart rates stabilized, their breathing slowed, their hands stopped shaking. Men who hadn't spoken in weeks started whispering lyrics. Some smiled for the first time since the battlefield. The doctors looked at each other like, what the hell is happening? Because medicine wasn't doing this. Therapy wasn't doing this. But music, simple, honest, human sound, was reaching these warriors in a way nothing else had. And at that moment, those hospital visits, those anonymous musicians offering comfort where nothing else worked, that was the birth of music therapy as a science. Not in a lab, not in a university, not in a research center, but in a room full of broken, exhausted American soldiers who had given everything they had to protect a world that was trying to destroy itself. And to me, that says something very powerful. These men didn't just defend the country. They helped give the world an entire new form of healing. They didn't know it at the time. Nobody did. But without them, without their courage, their trauma, their honesty, their vulnerability, music therapy might not even exist today. So in today's episode, we're going to trace the story from that moment, from those hospital rooms, and walk the path of how simple melodies became clinical treatment, how rhythm became medicine, how soldiers, our soldiers, help show the world what music is truly capable of. This isn't a story about music. It's a story about human resilience and about the men who paid the highest price and still managed to show the world a new way of healing. Music therapy, guys. It's always piqued my curiosity. I hope it piques yours. Let's get into it.
We're hanging out with Chops. Time just never stops. Answers fade like drops on a broken ticking clock.
When we left off, we were standing in those World War II hospital wards. watching music do something that medicine didn't even know how to explain. But let's pull back for a second, because what happened in those rooms wasn't luck, it wasn't magic. It was human nature showing its face. Why did soldiers respond so strongly to music? See, when soldiers come back from war, they didn't return as the same person. They return as someone who has seen the world at its most violent. Someone who lived minute to minute, not knowing if they'd make it home. And here's the thing no one wants to admit. Even the bravest men can fall apart on the inside. Hypervigilance, nightmares, explosive nerves, guilt, shame, depression, silence. Back then, PTSD, it wasn't even a term yet. They called it shell shock, like it was some temporary inconvenience. They didn't understand trauma yet. They didn't understand the brain. They didn't understand what war does to the human soul. But music understood them before science did. Because music works on the parts of the brain that trauma locks up. It bypasses language. It bypasses logic. It bypasses defenses. It goes straight to emotion and memory and safety. And that right there, that's why these soldiers reacted to music so intensely. When everything else was too much, music was the one thing that didn't ask anything of them. Music didn't need them to explain. Music didn't care about their rank or their injury. Music met them exactly where they were. And for these men, it was the first time since the battlefield that something felt safe again. Doctors didn't understand it, but they documented it. Here's where it gets interesting. The physicians running these military hospitals weren't emotional guys. They were scientists, data men. If you couldn't measure it, they didn't trust it. But they couldn't ignore what they were seeing. Soldiers in pain needed fewer meds during music sessions. Soldiers with nightmares slept better on nights that musicians visited. Depression eased. It didn't go away, but it eased up. Physical therapy participation went up. More guys wanted physical therapy. Heart rates and breathing stabilized during live music. This wasn't small. This was consistent. And these doctors, who had no idea why this was happening, started writing it all down in journals. They started documenting it. Not because they understood it, but because they couldn't deny it. Those early notes would eventually become the foundation of what we now call clinical music therapy research. But at the time, they were just trying to make sense of something incredible happening right in front of them. The volunteers became the pioneers. Now here's a part of the story nobody talks about. The musicians who came into these hospitals weren't therapists. They weren't trained. They weren't following some treatment plan, or they were volunteers. Some were church musicians singing hymns. Some were swing band players playing swing tunes. Some were community performers who just wanted to give these guys a moment of peace. They weren't trying to invent anything. They were simply doing what musicians do best, showing up with heart. But in the process, they became the first unofficial music therapists. And the soldiers responded to them not like entertainers, but like lifelines. Because when you're fighting your own mind, sometimes you don't need a doctor. Sometimes you need a human being with a guitar who reminds you that you're still alive. Here's the moment all this became a science. When the war ended, Hospitals didn't want to lose this. They had seen too much. The results were too obvious. So the medical field did something bold. They called up universities and said, hey, we need to figure all this out. We need to figure out what the hell this is. So Michigan State University stepped up. They became the first school in the country to create a formal music therapy degree. Not because some professor had a weird idea, but because doctors were practically begging for trained professionals who could replicate the results they saw in wartime hospitals. This is where music therapy shifts from charity to science. So they dug in. They studied how rhythm affects the motor system. Perfect for stroke recovery. Tremors. Perfect for coordination. They studied how melodies affect memory. That led to a breakthrough in Alzheimer's care. They studied how harmonies affect emotion and stress, which explained the calming effect soldiers experienced. They measured heart rates, breathing, dopamine, cortisol. They found consistent, repeatable psychological changes. They developed treatment methods. They came up with guided imagery, improvisation therapy, receptive listening, and songwriting-based therapies. This wasn't soft. This wasn't artsy. This was clinical, structured, and evidence-based. And the foundation of it, the reason it all exists, was because of those soldiers. That generation didn't just fight for freedom. They unintentionally helped create an entire field of medicine. Let me walk you through one of the most famous documented early cases. I changed his name for privacy, but the story's real. Let's call him Henry. Henry was a World War II infantryman, home after the war because he wasn't home. He didn't speak. He didn't respond to questions. He barely made eye contact. Physically healthy, but mentally shattered. Doctors were lost. One day, a musician came through the ward, just a volunteer with a guitar, and started playing songs from the 30s and 40s, stuff Henry would have danced to before the war. And out of nowhere, Henry started singing. He remembered the pitch of the song, sang along perfectly, full lyrics, full words. His voice didn't crack, his hands didn't shake. He was there, fully alive for the first time in months. The medical team was stunned. After the session, Henry spoke his first natural sentences since returning from the battlefield. From that moment on, music was used in his therapy, and his progress skyrocketed. He eventually regained his speech, emotional expression, and stability. Ain't that crazy? One volunteer with a guitar broke through where medicine and doctors couldn't. And Henry's case became one of the earliest documented examples of music unlocking trauma in a way psychology hadn't figured out yet. Now let's talk about the science behind why this works. Because today, we know what those doctors didn't. Music lights up the brain like a Christmas tree. More regions activate during music than almost anything else. Rhythm, it regulates the nervous system. It synchronizes breathing, heart rate movement, and emotional states. Melodies, they tap into deep memory pathways. This is why dementia patients know songs long after they've forgotten names. Harmonies, they influenced moods and stress. Major keys were uplifting. Minor keys, introspective. Dissonance, tension. Resolution, relief. Vibrations calm the body. Low frequencies literally relax muscles and reduce anxiety. So when you take a soldier with skyrocketing cortisol, trauma responses, PTSD symptoms, and chronic pain, Music is like hitting the reset switch on their entire system. Not magic, not spiritual, it's just biology. This is the part that hits me the hardest. Those men didn't set out to contribute to science. They weren't volunteering for research. They were simply trying to survive the aftermath of doing the hardest job in the world. But out of their suffering, out of their courage, out of their vulnerability, we gained trauma-informed therapy, clinical music therapy, neurological music therapy, stroke rehab protocols, dementia music intervention, children's hospital programs, veterans mental health services, all of it. Music therapy isn't just a field, it's a gift from men who carried the wounds of war. And personally, I don't ever want to forget that. Before we close today, I want to step back and honor something bigger than this episode, bigger than music, bigger than science. I want to honor the people who made this story possible, the ones who carried the weight of war, so the rest of us could walk in peace. The soldiers, the men and women who went into the unthinkable, came back carrying pieces of it, and still found ways to rebuild their lives. Sometimes using nothing more than melody, rhythm, and a simple song someone taught them long before they ever put on a uniform. You know, all this research we talk about, the early studies, the breakthroughs in neuroscience, the clinical sessions, it can feel very technical, very structured. But behind every chart, every study, every therapeutic result, there was a person, a soldier, someone's father, someone's mother, a brother, a sister, someone's child. And for many of them, music didn't just help, it saved them. I know this in my own family. My grandfather served in World War II. He was a POW, a prisoner of war. And somehow in the darkest, most dehumanizing moments a person can endure, the thing that had kept him connected to himself was music. He was a musician before he joined the war, and he became a musician again after the war to heal. Tunes he hummed to keep his mind alive, rhythms that reminded him he was still a human being when everything around him tried to say otherwise. Music was his lifeline, and because it was his lifeline, in a way, it became mine. Honestly, the reason I'm a musician, the reason I chose the path that I walk today, was because of my grandpa. He was a musician. To me, he carried magic in that guitar. And if there was one thing I wanted to be, it was like my grandpa. So when we talk about music therapy for soldiers, for veterans, for trauma survivors, it isn't an academic subject. It is a debt, a responsibility, a way to give back healing for the healing they sacrificed for us. To every veteran listening, thank you. Thank you for your service, your resilience, your courage, your willingness to walk through nightmares so the rest of us don't have to. Thank you for the parts of yourself you gave away, and for the parts you fought so hard to reclaim. And to the families, because every soldier story is also a family story, thank you for your strength, your patience, your love, your waiting, and your hope. This episode is for all of you. May music continue to be a refuge, a bridge back to joy. And remember, nobody heals alone. And as long as we tell these stories, as long as we honor the people behind the science, their songs, their melodies, they live on. Ain't that something? Guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this one episode. This one took a while for me to write it out. Music therapy was something that I've always wondered about. In college, some of my friends studied music therapy, and I've always wondered what that was about. So I did a little digging, nerded it out on the subject, and wow, I was blown away. I hope you were blown away. I hope it stirred something inside you. It's deep, guys. Music does stuff that we can't even explain. You can feel it. You can feel it in the sense of community when a couple of guys get together and jam out 3 or 4 chords. Brings back memories. Brings back great times. Well, guys, that wraps it up for this episode. And like always, you want to help keep the ball rolling, there's a support the show button in the front of this podcast. If you'd like to support the show, for as little as $3 a month, you can help keep the ball rolling. Guys, it's been a pleasure. I hope you had fun. I did. I learned something. I hope you did. And I'll catch you on the next one.
We're hanging out with Chops. Time just never stops. Answers fade like drops on a broken ticking clock. Stories told without a clue. Lost in chaos, nothing new. Searching for the something true. Faint whispers in the blue. Tune in, get lost in the flow. Unknown faces in a show. Spinning tales from long ago with nowhere else to go. We're hanging out with Chops. Time just never stops. Answers fade like drops on a broken ticking clock.